Hey there everybody, we're going live. I am editing a rulebook today. I'm actually editing the Lost Colonies Larp rulebook, and I'm just getting everything set up. As usual, beginning a stream here. It's going to take me a minute, but hang tight while I get everything set up and post where I need to post, and then I'll share my screen with you and do some editing. I'm actually just kind of getting a couple of other posts here, and then we'll check it out. Okay. I just posted on Twitter and Facebook and a couple places to let everybody know we were live. I kind of queued everything up and trying a little different pre-stream strategy. I'm learning that it takes a while. I lived with a professional streamer and saw the amount of work that went into kind of prepping a stream, and it's weird because I'm a professional LARPer and editor, so I don't really think about it as like, hey, I'm streaming professionally, but it is kind of part of the whole package. So I'm trying to put more of an effort into, letting people know when I'm going to go live and just kind of being really clear about exactly what it is I'm doing, especially because today, what I'd like to do, I have two goals aside from kind of educating people about the process of editing a rulebook for any kind of role-playing game. I do want to get people interested in actually attending Lost Colonies LARP, because from the beginning, the whole way I met Joe, one of the creators of the game, is that I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. How are you going to do this in a way that is respectful? Because it already looks super fun. And that kind of led to a bunch of conversations that led to me editing this rulebook, which is what I'm doing now. So I'm not just looking through this rulebook for, grammatical errors. I'm doing a developmental edit and a sensitivity edit, which means I'm actually going to read through it more than once, because I want to catch not only the grammar things that are wrong, I want to correct those, but I do also really want to make sure I'm getting, anything that could be misinterpreted as insensitive, and I want to make sure that everything makes sense too. It's able to be understood by a reader. So that's kind of how you do that. And what helps me there actually is I kind of read through it. So I'm not on staff for this game or anything like that. I've just been hired to do the rule book and have seen some information as the game has sort of progressed and going into playtesting mode. So I am looking at this from the point of view as a player. I hope to play the game, so I'm like a prospective player reading the rulebook. So one of my reads for this edit is going to be as a player. So as a player, does this make sense to me? And I'm not a new LARPer, and I've done rules-heavy LARPs, I've done rules-light LARPs, so I do have a little bit of a background in both sides of this, because Lost Colonies LARP is very much in the middle of like a rules-heavy LARP and a free-form game. It really takes kind of the best habits of both of them and squishes it into one thing. And so I want to try to approach it from the perspective of, somebody who has never done this kind of LARP before. Because really there are very few LARPs that do take the best of both worlds. And that's one reason why I'm sort of fascinated by this one. So I want to make sure that it makes sense to the potential player. I want to make sure that it makes sense grammar-wise. So right now I'm like partway through the first edit, which is focusing mainly on grammar, but I am pointing out some other stuff. And then the third edit will be sensitivity. It will be not really a very close reading, but I want to go through and make sure certain things appear sensitive. There are already, and I want to make an important note about this, there are already a couple of things. There's nothing blatantly, insensitive in this rulebook that I've seen so far, and I really don't anticipate that being a thing. But there are a couple things where I come across it and I'm like, I wonder if that is racially insensitive. And being white, I'm not the person to answer that. So there are a few places where you'll see me not try to dodge the question, but just to say, hey, I'm not qualified to answer this, but as your sensitivity editor, I'm telling you, you need to ask someone about this. So if there's anything that I'm remotely questioning in a sense of something that could be racially insensitive, I'm just kind of marking it down, and expecting, that those answers will be completed by, a person of color who is somehow compensated for their time and emotional labor. So I can't do everything, but I am doing my best and doing the most. Hey there, hi Jean, hi Joe. It's good to see you both here. Just kind of explaining what I'm going through, what I'm doing for the rulebook today, and getting everything sorted out. And Joe, thanks so much for the Prime subscription too. That's really helpful. For those watching who don't know, if you're in the US and you have Amazon Prime, you actually get a free subscription to any Twitch channel. And my costs, especially for a really specialized thing like role-playing game design, are very low compared to what a lot of people do charge. I do have 15 years of experience as an editor, and one way that I can keep those costs down is by having other revenue sources, this stream being one of them. So Lost Colonies Larp was gracious enough to let me actually edit this on stream so that everybody can learn from it. And another thing that does for me is it does open up another revenue stream to help keep it low. So there are a couple things you can do. One of them totally free. Connect your Prime account and just click subscribe, and it costs you nothing extra, and it gives me a little bit of money, so that's super cool. The other thing you can do, there are bits you can drop in. If you click the little triangle-y thing, like looks like a pizza slice in the chat box, that is also free for most users. You can click on that and watch a couple ads, and then you'll get bits to donate, and each bit translates into monies for me, so that's really good too, and greatly appreciated. So I'm about ready to get into the editing portion. We did about a third, I think, of the book a couple nights ago, but my goal is to finish the book this weekend. I have a lot of stuff on my plate, but I really want to knock this one out of the park because I'm, as you can probably tell, using this as a springboard to really be the editor of live-action role-playing game materials. It's a real culmination of my experience, and I've done a lot of thinking about what I want to do professionally in LARP. And two things keep coming up. I love editing rulebooks and giving feedback on concepts, and that's very related to the other thing, which is people keep coming to me and saying, hey, I know you're looking for work. Are you consulting? I'll pay you to look over this document or to have a conversation about me or with me about my concept. Especially a lot of people who are kind of hesitant about jumping into LARP and making money on it professionally, but have some really great ideas. And a lot of these people have attended one or two of my games, or games that I've helped run, or games I've just played in. And really, really, really hoping that, some of that will take off. So I am available for that stuff too. And this is sort of my foray into that. I've done several editing pieces. I mean, I edit just about everything for Lauren Larp, give that a final pass for them. I've done some editing work for a few board game companies, including Everything Epic. And I've done a lot of material for the Game Theater. They do Dragon Thrones. I've written a little bit there too, safety and consent rules, and I've done some Cthulhu stuff, even though I'm not familiar with Cthulhu. Interesting, because sometimes you want an editor who's like intimately familiar with whatever you're designing in, because I've done Vampire too, Vampire rulebook editing, and I'm not a Vampire the Masquerade, World of Darkness LARPer. I know what that stuff is. I know people who do it. If you came to me and said, who do I go to learn more about this? I'd be like, not me, but I know who. But sometimes you want an editor who knows what role-playing games are, but isn't familiar with the course material. Because if you want to do, I'll use Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition as an example. D&D 5e was supposed to be super accessible to new people, right? So of course, Wizards wants to send that to an editor who knows everything about D&D and make sure that it makes sense. All the technical pieces are there, definitely. But they should also, and probably did also, send it to somebody more in my expertise, which is someone who knows about role-playing games, maybe casually plays D&D, but isn't an expert. Because if your goal is to get new people into LARP or tabletop or your specific game, you need an editor who maybe isn't obsessed with what you're doing, but has a good idea about it, or maybe has a little bit of enthusiasm about it. And that's where I am with Lost Colonies LARP. First of all, it's new, so there aren't a lot of people who have played with it and had the chance to really become part of the community, but I do have an enthusiasm for it, and really for what they're accomplishing in the game design and rulebook. And again, it's like such a cool meld of this bot for combat style that we see that a lot of us think of when we think of LARP in the US, as well as some more Nordic-inspired freeform ideas about gameplay and how we treat each other as a community. So that really has my interest, and that's one reason why I accepted this project and why I just love the rulebook so far. So today I'm editing it. I do ask, if you're used to editing documents or watching people do it, I ask for a little bit of patience only because I have the document itself on a PDF, and I'm not doing PDF markup. What I am doing is all of my edits in Word. So there is going to be a little back and forth, especially since I'm using one screen. I have like some limited tech here, so I've got like my MacBook, which is what I'm looking at right now, and then when I'm looking over here, I'm actually looking at the stream and all of your comments and stuff there. So instead of using multiple screens and all sorts of stuff, I've got a low-tech setup, so just be a little patient with me. And I am going to go ahead and switch it over right now so you can see my screen as well as you'll still be able to see me. So let me just adjust some stuff real fast here so you can see everything. Okay. It's going to take just a second. If you have any questions about the editing process or LARPing, go ahead. I think Joe is still here, so if you have questions about Lost Colonies, you can post those in too. And in the event that he's not still here, we'll get you answers. You can also check out Lost Colonies LARP on Facebook. Just look that up and you'll find it. I think it's just facebook.com/Lost Colonies LARP. Okay, so I just need the display capture to be enabled. There we go. Alright, you can tell I'm like obsessed with the Thor movies, which is why I have that in the background. Alright, I'm gonna move this over. This is the behind the scenes part of streaming here. Okay, and I'm just gonna pull up the rulebook, which is right here, and I'm gonna take a look at how that looks on the screen for you. Because I try to get it kind of over to the side so we can all see exactly what I'm editing. Okay, so we're pretty much able to see both. The rulebook itself might be a little small to see, but I've been doing all my edits in like very large font, so you should be able to see everything. I'm just double checking to make sure it's viewable. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. You know what? I'm gonna mod you, Sheen, so that you can actually post links. Hang on one second. I'm running on old tech, so it takes a while for the letters to come up. Okay. And Joe, I'm gonna moderate you too. That means you can both post links now, or should be able to. Okay, the other thing is, if anybody happens to come in and be a random troll, you can kick them out. So, we don't tolerate misogynists in here. We don't tolerate racists, so, like, you don't even have to ask me. Just boot them the hell out. Hasn't been a big problem because I don't really stream in IRL. I've thought about doing that, but there's so many trolls. Yeah, I do kick them out pretty rapidly. I don't stream in IRL because IRL you get a lot of trolls, and so thank you. So yeah, it's more like trolling or troll monitoring than actually working. And right now I need to work. So yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them in there. Questions in general about editing, but also questions about the guide itself, because we have people in here who have actually worked on it and written it and everything. So questions about like why I'm asking things. So again, since this is on PDF, I'm not marking up the PDF directly, but I'm putting everything in here so you can follow it, because there are a couple things that are lost there. Okay, cool. Yes, okay, good. Now you can post links and not get banned. Okay. So I had stopped at the end of... Yes, I had stopped at the end of the ancestries. Okay. And for those watching who are not at all familiar with Lost Colonies LARP, the beginning, the intro of this rulebook explained that what you're looking at here is basically like the quick start. So you can see how these ancestries, they do describe like the makeup requirements and stuff like that. It's not super detailed. There aren't like 8 million things, and it's a quick start guide. So I like that it's really accessible like that. Okay. So what I do for this is I basically read through a paragraph until I find something that I think I want to change, and then I either make a small note or I copy the whole paragraph and just mark it up. There are a couple paragraphs that had several changes, so I'll just copy the whole thing. If not, I just, note the correction in there, and they can follow along where we are, because obviously if I'm referencing regions, they know that I'm in the regions section, and it's all in order. Okay. Also, I went with the Celtic music theme today. I was feeling it. Hi, kitty. Hi. I can't snuggle. I want to show everybody the kitty. She's not my kitty. She's my roommate's kitty. I live with them, and she's really sweet. But I'm like a little allergic to kitties, so I can't snuggle kitty. Otherwise, there would be a kitty on screen if she's all purring and wanting attention. Sorry, kitty. I have nothing for you, and I have no food. Okay. So, right now I am reading all about Sobukand. Yes, there's a kitty. Yes, I am streaming. Welcome back. Yeah, it's been a while, but the more editing work I get on RPGs especially, the more, I love streaming editing more than anything, because I get to teach people about the process. A lot of people, especially authors, don't necessarily want their work streamed as it's edited, which I understand for copyright reasons, but also because it could be potentially embarrassing. So it's not always easy to be I need to find clients who like being super transparent about everything. It's just not always possible, and when things aren't released, they're not released. So this is a more rare opportunity than I like. I have been doing a lot of editing work, just not streamed. And I was in flocks moving and stuff like that. But now I'm moved, settled in, and have a document that I can stream, which is fantastic. I'll also export these to YouTube so we can see them. Okay. Yeah, so for anybody who's watching that is an editor, a lot of times in role-playing game books and in culture in general, they're going to capitalize things that you wouldn't normally capitalize in a book. So one of the biggest judgment calls I often make as an editor, or ask the writers to make, is, am I keeping that in? For example, if the game has different classes like Rogue or Bard, you need to decide if you want those capitalized or not. So what I usually do is I kind of skim through the book and see what they've done, and kind of edit it, because it's its own thing. It's not like every other book, and this is why you want somebody who edits role-playing game materials, because if it's there for clarity, then I keep it. If it's there just because they wrote it that way, then I nix it. So there are a couple things like safety and consent in this document. Safety and consent are the most important things about this game and this culture. I left safety and consent capitalized everywhere because it makes it clear and emphasizes that it's important. Not necessarily a thing I would keep capitalized in a rando thing, but for this specific project, I'm making the judgment call that that's important and that they want it to be important. So those are the kind of things you want to look out for. Now, we haven't run into anything about Sobukand yet, the Empire, or the Empresses. So what I'm going to do is read through it a little bit and make a call about whether things like the Empire should be capitalized. It's the same rule as you could take president as an example. I'll use an awesome president and not a jerk as my example. So if you're talking in, if you're saying, okay, tomorrow I'm going to go meet President Obama, you would capitalize the P because you're talking about title directly. You're talking about person. It's part of his name. If you're talking about President Obama, but you don't say his name, and you say, tomorrow I'm going to go meet the president, president's not capitalized. So here, Yes, Joe is saying it's a technical term that has game meaning, not always a proper name. Right. Anything that relates to like mechanics and rules, I keep that capitalized and make sure that's consistent. If you send it to a rando editor who's used to editing like books and stuff, they might be like, lowercase that, right? And that's something I had to learn when I started reading and editing role-playing games. If there's like a real technical reason for it, you need to keep it. Overall, as an editor, you want to focus on clarity. And especially with a game rulebook, you really need to focus on making sure people understand, these rules and this information. Great, awesome. Thank you so much. It's good to see you. I know, I'm actually streaming after a while. Oh. Okay, so, Joe, since I have you on here, I'm looking at empire, empresses, kingdoms, and provinces, and I'm going to ask you, do they have a specific function rules-wise in the game? Because I'm considering lowercasing them, but if they really need to be distinct and separate for game reasons, then I'm going to keep them capitalized. Like, if that's a very important distinction and functions differently than it does in the real world, then I think that should stay as is with the capitalizations. So, moving on while Joe answers, for the purpose of character creation, we call them regions with a capital R. In this instance, I'm going to leave regions capitalized because that's a very specific thing that they need to refer to in character creation. And players need to know that this is specific. Okay, the term region does have meaning. So empire, empresses, kingdoms don't necessarily have a specific meaning. Awesome, thank you. So in this instance, what I'm going to suggest, and I'm going to copy and paste it so that I can make the changes, is I'm going to lowercase a lot of that stuff. Okay. Another note I want to make is that this rulebook, it's not like a Word document that's saved as a PDF. Joe wrote it in like a specific programming format. So you're going to see sometimes I don't preserve all the paragraph breaks and stuff while I'm editing or some of the formatting. We talked about that, and I'm going to not worry about that because he's going to have to kind of go in there and do that anyway or work within the confines of how he's already got that formatted. So every now and then you might see that happen. I just kind of want to let you know. Normally it's not a thing I do. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make this large like the rest of it so we can all see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to track the changes. When you're working with an editor for anything, the default should be for them to track changes. So, like, let's say Joe wasn't here, and, ASCI Doctor PDF. Yes. Correct. Yeah, Empire of Sobukand. I'll not butcher your awesome names. Versus the Empire. Yes, that's the distinction. Correct. So what I'm going to do is track changes. So live edits are cool because if the client wants to watch, they can, which is what's happening here. But let's say it was a normal edit, and, my friends from Lost Colonies were not watching. This way, when I change it, it saves what I tracked. It says that I deleted a capital E and made it lowercase, and this will give them the option to accept or reject the changes, or in this case, since Joe has to go back in and put it in this other type of program, he'll be able to easily see what I changed. So he can either accept the changes and copy and paste back, or just see specifically what he has to change, which in traditional publishing is really how you work with the publisher. You mark up a document and send it back, work with the typesetter rather. You mark up a document, send it back, and they make the changes. I used to work as a production editor, so the Empire, lowercase, whereas kingdoms. And I have to say, when I work with academics and technical writers, this is a really common thing that they do, which is overcapitalize stuff. Better than undercapitalizing stuff, let me tell you. So, awesome. Okay. Of the Empire... we call them regions. And again, regions I'm leaving capitalized because that's got a very specific game function. Okay. On an individual region. Okay, here's another question. You have guides that will be available on our website. Are they still unavailable? There are a couple things in this rules. The rules book was definitely written before a lot of the supplementary material was done, before the website was done. And so I just want to make sure, because we really want to have, I'm just going to take this out for now. And then if you need to change it, you can. Because if the rules book says will be available, that could look good. Okay, you're still working on it. Information for public release. Okay. Yeah, so, just I'm kind of being a little forward thinking with the rule book of like this is something you want to last for a while, and of course you'll do updates and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm trying to make it like, because a lot of this is like this world will do this, and a lot of what I changed is relating to that. Like instead of this world will do this, it's this world functions this way. Like you're setting out your game world. Obviously, there are practical things like region guides maybe not being ready. So, again, that's just kind of why I leave it in as a suggested change. Okay. Farther south, the climate gets generally colder. Oh, I need to take this off. My comma rules, I always just edit for clarity. I'm trying to make this clear to the user. So I'm not trying to be nitpicky, I just try to make it best. Awesome, great. I'm glad you're happy with the stuff I'm finding. Okay. Alright, and then I put other things in, and again, this first sheet is just for grammar, but I put other suggestions in. So for things like where you're saying important, I'm thinking almost like a, or like a 101 document. I'm thinking about it almost like, I forget what those things are called, like the Dummy's Guide to, Microsoft Office. I don't know. It's like what my grandparents used. They have like a little light bulb thing there, so maybe like some kind of equivalent of that. And this feedback is also really specific. So this rulebook already looks really good, and I know that you have your own graphic designer and resources available. So I might not tell everybody like, hey, put a special image in or something like that, but thinking about it that way, knowing that you're good at the at kind of like technical rules document creation, I think having some kind of like tips thing would be cool. Yeah, image of a hand. Yeah, exactly. Something like that would be cool. So as I come across stuff like that, I just leave the notes in the Word doc for you. Please be respectful of their culture. We're talking about multiple cultures, so. Alright, that's a small change. Okay, now this is really important for anybody watching who is new to terms like cultural appropriation. That's really, hang on, I saw one more technical thing before I talk about cultural appropriation and why that's important in a sensitivity edit. I want to make sure I get all the grammar stuff now. Okay. So cultural appropriation is like a really hot topic in LARP and something that people rage quit LARP groups over. There's a major group a lot of us are familiar with called LARP Haven. If you Google it, you'll find my article where I made it a picture of a dumpster fire because LARP Haven gets really up in arms about this topic. Many people feel that it is inappropriate to take religious or ceremonial elements in particular from certain cultures and to use it for funsies as costuming or LARP. You've probably seen a lot of stuff at Halloween in general saying my culture is not a costume. This is like a continuation of that. It's important to respect people. So I tend to work with game designers who are in the inclusive community and on that side of things who feel that it's really important to make a distinction between costuming that evokes a certain aesthetic versus appropriating really specific religious or ceremonial costuming. And just as they've done here, that whole religious or ceremonial distinction is super important. That's like a major indicator that you're appropriating. If you're taking from somebody's religious or ceremonial garments, or something that's really significant in a culture in a different way, or something that's like a physical characteristic, evokes a physical characteristic, that's a good example of something that might be appropriative. I work with another company, Larp. They do New World Magiscola, and they have advised their players not to use feathers on their costuming, because if you have people coming from from specific regions, all of the regions are named after different like cryptids and legendary things from native peoples. Not in an appropriative way, but in an inclusive way. But if you have people walking around with, like, eagle feathers and stuff, right? That's problematic because that has specific meaning to some of those cultures. So you have to really kind of get into the specifics, really get into the weeds of, like, what is and isn't appropriative. And when you have a LARP like this, I don't know if you guys mentioned feathers. I haven't really gotten too into it, but that might be another one that you kind of might want to borrow from them. That's an example of, hey, please don't do that. So my character was part of, one of my characters was part of a house that, whose symbol was the raven. They had ravens. And so I had these shoulder pieces with raven feathers. So because I wanted to be sensitive, I understood that the rule was meant to, prohibit people from using appropriative things. So I simply got it cleared with the game runners. I said, this is the costume piece I have, and I showed them a picture. Is this okay, or is it still appropriative? And I was going to respect no matter what they said, but I understand why that rule is there. So instead of flipping out about it, I was like, hey, my intent isn't to appropriate. I hope that my impact isn't appropriative. Can you review this for me? And, hopefully most players will go to the organizers with stuff like that. Let's see. Yeah, and one thing, I haven't read this whole paragraph, but one thing I'm going to suggest is putting in here something about, like, if you're not sure, just ask us. I'm going to include that note. So, if you're not sure, ask us. Just kind of go the extra mile and say we're happy to review costuming prior to play. And consider also things, let's see, I'm not going to say ban, prohibiting specific use feathers. Okay, so another thing I try to do in my editorial notes is I try to use language that my client can use in the document. So instead of saying banning, because it's really like negative, it's like a reactive word, I changed it to use the word prohibiting. So that way, if they would like to add more language and use that word, they're going to have the right word choice. I also did that with, we are happy to review costuming prior to play. That way they can just lift my notes and pop it right in the document if they'd like to do that. Thankfully, in that case, we have a strong base of costumes. So hopefully in the case of a yeah, maybe that piece can be prohibitive, we will be met with, how can we help you accomplish the same aesthetic? Great. So yeah, go into... and also to anybody else watching who's considering this kind of edit, you can see exactly how much more Lost Colonies LARP is getting out of the fact that I'm doing this live with them, because I'm able to go back and forth and ask about stuff, and we're lifting language from each other to accomplish the goal of being really clear. We've talked about feathers. We think they use enough use always. Right, good. We already asked with Native heritage if they could represent that in their costuming, which we are happy to allow. Yeah, that's also important. You don't want to ban people from using their own culture if they want to. I am Irish American, and I've actually gotten really interested in and comfortable with playing this archetype of Irish America. And there are certain things that I feel like if I were not Irish American, I would not feel comfortable portraying. And at Armistice Arcane and On the Rocks, I got, and a little bit with my main character from Magical, I've gotten really into kind of exploring some of those concepts of, Irish Americans policing their overall wider community, and alcohol and culture, sadness, things that, if not done with a certain nuance from someone within or without the culture, could be considered like pretty offensive. Now, of course, being of Irish heritage isn't necessarily like a marginalization, but there is some history there. I don't think, people use it to excuse all sorts of racist behavior now, which is complete bullshit, and unacceptable. And I spend a lot of time kind of, fighting back against that attitude. But, you want to be sensitive with any culture. I'm using this as an example because it's me and it's mine and my culture, and I'm very comfortable with it. So, if somebody is from a culture and they want to portray certain things, they should certainly be allowed to do that. So, specific use of feathers. Folks from... I'm just kind of putting them down as notes so that we remember what we discussed. Very important. Okay, cool. We really wanted to make it easy for people to costume for Lost Colonies, which means ensuring that there's a low-cost option for all regions to be represented. But that also means that we need to allow things that are already available to be purchased, or that are patterns available from places like Simplicity. That's really true. Costume accessibility is a big thing. I started out as a buffer LARPer with like 1 or 2 pieces of costuming, and now I have a whole, there's like, you can see the cabinet behind me. That whole chest of drawers is full of costuming. My corsets have their own drawer. This is really typical of LARPers, and since we want to include people, and that's specifically a mission of Lost Colonies LARP, to include people and welcome first-time LARPers, you really do want to make sure that costume is accessible. Even higher cost LARPs have thought about that sometimes. Some really focus on a specific aesthetic. I was able to afford costuming for Armistice Arcane, which was a high-ticket LARP, primarily because I was playing an Irish American character and had that costuming. If I hadn't, I would have had to scramble, right? So sometimes that's more or less important than others. Magical costs hundreds of dollars, but it takes place in the modern time, so you can pretty much use regular clothes if you need to. I started out pretty much doing that. I was low budget when I went there. I bought a couple like dresses that I could also use every day. I actually wore one to a job interview last week. And then by the time I played like my 5th event, I had a super fancy coat and stuff. Really, really common per LARP, especially if you're campaigning or playing a character more than once, is to have your costuming improve over time. Some of the pieces that I wear now, I wore at 7th Kingdom, which I haven't even played for like 2 years, but I was a founding staff member, and I've played for 7 years, or at least 7 years. So, people do reuse things, and we want to make that accessible. Joe says, some of those patterns are aimed at Halloween grade costuming and is appropriate, some is not, and there's no easy, hard, and fast rule. Yeah, cultural appropriation is one of the most difficult things, I think, to define and capture, and especially if you're white, like, can you even say that something isn't, appropriative? That's a really tough one. That's one that I back off a lot, making a judgment call on. Just like I said at the beginning of this, there are a couple times in here where I've basically directed Lost Colonies LARP to please seek the opinion of a person of color, because that's not me. But, like, hey, this, you might want to word this a different way, or I see how this could be interpreted as problematic. There's a sensitivity editor that's tough, because I'm not going to be sensitive to everything. I have some chronic illnesses and stuff. So if I saw an accessibility thing, I'd be like, yo, you need to change this. But if I saw something that was racially insensitive, the best I can do is really point them to a better resource. So there are limits to what kind of sensitivity edits you might get depending on the editor. No editor is going to have every marginalization. I've had people of color who are fully able direct people to me with sensitivity edit material to talk about, and this is not in the Larp space, but to talk about, accessibility, and that was at like a marketing event. So, we definitely direct here and there. The key is just in making sure that everybody's compensated for their labor emotional labor or otherwise. Okay. And that's like another trust thing. When I'm working with somebody and I'm sending them to somebody else for an answer, like there's got to be a little bit of a trust between the editor and the author. Like, I know that Lost Colonies LARP is awesome and they're going to do a great job at that. But it is tough because if I were editing a random author, which I've done, I'm like, okay, they're just going to go and bother a person of color for an answer and not compensate them in any way. And that's not okay. So there's a little bit more education that needs to go on there in some instances. Not here, they already know. But with some random, like, romance authors, I've had to do that. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next paragraph. Okay. Yeah, this whole paragraph is good. I think it just needs more. Great, thank you so much for stopping by. Alright, so now we're getting into the different regions. This rulebook is already laid out really well. So an advantage to having a fully completed rulebook, and I find that game designers more than any other person will send me a completed rulebook in a PDF format. There are some disadvantages to that when it comes to editing, but a major advantage is that you don't have to create all of the headings and subheadings, especially when you're working with a technically minded person like Joe. They've already done that here. This is already done for me. Normally that is a thing I would do. For me, I am not a technically minded game designer, so when I write my first draft of stuff, I don't even bold anything. I'll just make these titles and not do anything with them. And I'll fix it in my editing and then have somebody else look over it because, that stuff is tough, like 8 different subpoints or whatever. But I just kind of want to point out one good thing about working with a completed thing is that that's here, and I'm really just checking it as I go. Okay. Alright, Imperial, that's going to be the next term that I'm wondering if that should be capitalized or not. I'm thinking yes for now, but I might come back to it. Oh no, wait, this is just referring to the empire before, right? So, I'm going to say Imperial Capital City. Imperial. Okay. Alright, one thing they did right here that I'm just going to point out for people watching, there's a difference between a capital AL and a capital OL. An OL is going to refer to a building, but if you're talking about like a city or general location, capital with an AL, just like they've done here, is correct. Cool, okay. I love how you can garner a lot about the culture from the aesthetic. It's pretty cool. Alright. Geography and skills. Okay. I don't know if each region has its own symbol. Consider creating, inserting region symbols by regions and descriptions. And that's to help visual folks get a little bit more comfortable with it. You want to get people associated with those symbols right away, so if they have them, put them in the book. If not, you can just ignore that. Yeah, that way they immediately associate it with it. So I'm actually not a visual person. I'm a word person. I'm a word nerd. But because I'm not a visual person, it takes a long time for me to have that association. And even though I'm like I don't have any like dyslexia or any kind of like divergence there, it's hard for me to associate like Holthar with a particular symbol if I've only first seen it at the game. I feel a lot better if it's all on one page in one place, so that's kind of cool. As much as I love detailed characters, I love character sheets that are one page and include all that stuff on there. So if it said my faction to have, or my region, to have that symbol there. Our Mistress Arcane did a great job at that. Every time they really talked about the factions, they put the symbol, and that helped me start to identify it. And then when we were at game, every faction had a different pin. And so I could tell by what pin they were wearing what faction they were in, and even though there were like 8 of them, it wasn't too much for me to remember because I'd been reading over these game materials over and over. Another way to do it is just from the game design phase is limiting it. Magic School has five houses, I think, so there are less, and each house is associated with a color. So that color affiliation, think like straight up Harry Potter. Each house is associated with colors, can also help. I don't know if your rulebook is going to be in color or black and white, but you might want to make it so that it could be printed in black and white, but so that the PDF itself has colors, and you can do that there and or on the website. Okay, I'll put that in the notes too. And this, you might not want to do it with regions, or you might. It depends on how significant regions are as like your major defining thing. If they are a huge defining thing for each character, then you should definitely put more time and attention into that. Designing it to be printable in black and white. Okay, so yeah, so you can still use colors, but just make sure that it looks okay in black and white printing. Yeah, and that's very accessible too. Cotton, wool, and silk. Okay. I'm making Oxford comma editions throughout because it is a lot clearer and clarity is totally the point of a rulebook. Okay. 17th century American or European colonial cotton, wool, and silk are readily available materials. Sometimes I read a lot of myself as an editor. It's easier to catch things. Geography, warm and heavily forested. Skills, appraise, hunting, medicine. Alright. Again, pronunciation guide for regions and or phonetic glossary would really help. When we started 7th Kingdom, Jobert Aquino was the rules director who wrote a phenomenal amount of lore and did such a really good job. And one thing that right away we saw that we had to do was people were like, how do I say these things? Because we were using words that people hadn't seen before, even though they were kind of resonating from existing cultures. So the Firbolg are a Celtic-inspired group, and one that I, again, considering heritage, felt really comfortable playing very fully. But there were a lot of words in there that were a little difficult to pronounce because, various forms of Gaelic are not easy to somebody who only knows English. So things like that, you want to think about as you go. And even the regions, like, I'm assuming this is Holthar, Tayan, Feldland, or Feldland. It's almost like a difference in pronunciation, like some people will say Maryland, and some people will say Maryland, like in the here and now. So if you have preferences there, even for the basic ones, do it. In Magiscola, people were pronouncing, the name of the prison in that world is Avernus, but some people were saying Avernus. I might be saying it wrong, I say Avernus. And some people even thought it was French, and they were saying Avenue. So it seemed like an obvious one to me. When I read it, I was like, that's Avernus. Clearly that's how they meant it to sound. But other people had a totally different pronunciation, probably formed by their own regions and their own just how they hear it in their head. And again, with accessibility, if somebody isn't necessarily great at reading and sounding stuff out, it'll help them to have that. So, Holtar. Okay, so yeah, that's a really important one because I read that as Holthar. So if that's Holtar, I can see how that pronunciation is also is valid. But definitely you want to put a pronunciation like straight up next to it because people are going to roll into your game being like, I'm from Holthar. Yeah, Holthar, Tayen, Freeland, Feldland, Soryund or Sorjund. So see what I mean? It's got to be super phonetic. So if I see Sor, Jund, I'm like, is it like Norse? Is it Yund? Is it like Jotun? Yeah. So be super specific and phonetic about it. So, and I would do it, look at how Facebook does their name pronunciations. They make it really easy. So you would do it like this. I'll do an example on here. Holtar. You would put it in brackets and you would do Holtar. Sorjund. Okay. Yeah, so, yeah, you definitely need those in there. Also, it's frustrating when you make really great lore and people can't pronounce things. I had that problem with Chariot. People were like, what? With the, some of the character names. I'm like, it's fine, it's yours, own it, whatever. But if it were like a major element of the game, like your regions, that would be annoying. Clothing inspired by traditional Asian cultures. Silk is readily available because of trade. Because of trade, so is okay. All right. Cool. All right. Yeah, the Asian culture thing, it's weird because, you know, there's a big debate over that too, but it's like, if you skirt around calling the aesthetic inspired by traditional Asian cultures, I feel like that's even worse than just saying inspired by traditional Asian cultures. But I also think that it's okay because you have up here 17th century American or European colonial. That's not necessarily 17th century London, right? European is broad and Asian is broad. Because some systems will be like, you're looking at, you know, this specific thing. That said, you're saying right here 17th century. I know you want the clothing to be accessible, but I feel like it's really specific to the century, to the era. And people might be offended that you're not being as specific to the era in Asian cultures. Like, all Asian stuff is the same. Yeah, the words, yeah, that's true. So that's something to think about. I'm trying to think of how to notate that for you. Because you don't want to limit what people do. I mean, I've seen people show up in, like, anime outfits to a LARP, and they're like, well, this is what I already did for my cosplay, and I'm like, what? You know, so you kind of have to limit that. So I'm going to say for Tayen. I gotta put this in brackets because it's a note. Our mission statement is this: not too modern looking, less steampunk. Yes, I saw that and thought that it was really good. Inclusive of all parts of the world, but certain parts of the real world mapped to different regions. Yeah, and I definitely think what you're going for is clear. I just want to help you stay out of trouble with that. And this might be one of those things where you need to yeah, you might need to talk to somebody who's Asian about how best to handle that. I feel like that's something I'm not equipped to really answer. But it is my job to kind of point it out. Okay. Feldland. I think you've done a really good job with that with Feldland. Really interesting. Lots of different ancient cultures. River basin cultures. That's cool. You're looking at what they have in common. Cool. Alright. Yeah, that's going to be the trickiest part so far that I've seen of the rulebook. We want to allow African clothing, but not necessarily this to be from the same centuries or European clothing. That makes sense. Yeah, I would say you might need to, I would say the clothing is what needs a real specific read from, like, an expert on whether or not it's appropriative in Larp. That's a real specific thing. It's tough. It's tough. You've done a really good job so far. Okay. Southern regions of Sobukand. I'm saying Sobukand. That might also need a pronunciation. I don't know if I'm right, but are generally cold, and the people who live there are used to a more difficult life. These do a kind of practical approach to solving problems. Okay. Just gonna word that a little better. Just adding things here. Okay. Sobukand. Nailing down time periods is hard. Yes. Yes. Permissive rather than exclusive. Yeah, I would say that phrase is really good. Permissive rather than exclusive. Those are your own words, Joe. I would say add that to beginning of region costume stuff. I think you need needs more about your intent. And needs more about your intent because that can help with the impact. Like, you just kind of need to be upfront about it. Okay. Cool. I really like the different blends. You didn't make it like it just has to be medieval Europe. You're like, they could be from different places. The whole Mongolian thing, that's pretty cool. Carindian clothing style. Okay, wool like. Wool. Hi there, DF Benito. Nice to see ya. Thank you for joining in. I'm editing the Lost Colonies Larp rulebook right now. And going through some specific regions and like sub-regions here. I think there's sub-regions, right? Yeah, southern regions. Okay, clothing style. I like this. You've like avoided the whole like dwarf stereotype thing while still doing mining stuff. And these are, these are humans, so. All right. I am not in charge of LARP events rules. Joe is actually in here. This is his LARP, Lost Colonies LARP. And I am in charge of just editing this rulebook for him. I'm doing a couple different things. I love to edit LARP rulebooks. And I love to kind of evaluate rules and more specifically lore, culture. Right now I'm going over different regions in Joe's game. And yeah, I'm in charge of basically looking through this and making sure it all makes sense grammatically. I'm doing a sensitivity edit to make sure that there's nothing inadvertently offensive in here that would bother people or make them feel uncomfortable or like they can't access this game. And I am also doing a developmental edit to overall make sure it makes sense. So I'm going to go through this more than one time. But this is the first read. I'm primarily focusing on grammar, but I'm, especially while I have Joe here, I'm pulling out a lot about, the things that could be misinterpreted or intended in a different way than he and the other designers have meant. So, yeah, that's what I'm working on. I do a lot of rulebook editing. Kind of about to launch more fully into that business-wise. It's just a passion of mine, and I also design LARPs, so that's what I'm rolling into. Do I research the lore also? Well, if I'm working on somebody else's world, like I am right now, I'm going based on what they've provided me. And although I've followed the progress and the development of Lost Colonies LARP, and I've talked to Joe a lot personally about his intentions for the game, I'm trying to take this rulebook at face value because I really want to interpret this like, I'm a new player, do I feel included, does this make sense, does this lore make sense? And one of the things as an example that I just came up with a little bit ago was, I don't necessarily know if I'm pronouncing some of these names right, so I advised Joe to maybe add some phonetic pronunciations. I advised him to maybe add some, because I know he has a graphic designer like on the team, which is amazing, to maybe come up with some little icons to add for like tips like you would see in other rule books, stuff like that. Yeah, this is, this rulebook fortunately is in very close to final form, and I am just kind of tweaking it at the end. This is like final pass as a rulebook designer, as a game designer, because I do that too. That's the point where you want to bring in your editor. And I'm trying to be like the editor for LARP stuff. I do this constantly for Learn LARP, who runs New World Magiscola. I edit most, if not all, of their materials. I kind of give them the final look. Again, Mari, who runs Learn LARP, always sends me stuff in like final form unless it's like just an idea she needs to bounce off of me. So, yeah, definitely, like, the best thing to do is send it to the editor when it's pretty final. Joe has also done a lot of play testing, as well as his team. They've done a lot of play testing already. They've done a lot of market research. There's a lot of work that's gone into this other than just coming up with the lore. So I'm also editing this knowing that work has been done, and I'm kind of framing my questions in that context. But, yeah, thank you so much for asking questions. Part of the reason I'm streaming this is because I want to answer questions people have about game design stuff. Yeah, nearly 2 years. And that is how you write, produce, and market a LARP. If you really want to do it right, that's exactly it. When I first started talking to Joe, it was because I'd heard about this concept and I was like, I had questions and concerns, but I was also like, oh wow, like as soon as I started talking to him, I was like, I know exactly, like he knows what he's doing. He's asking the right questions, connecting with the right people, and that's kind of what you need to do to really fully launch a game of this magnitude. I'm really personally interested in this LARP in particular because this live-action role-playing game combines a very specific, typical American style of boffer LARPing, the stereotype, for better or worse, where you go out and hit people with boffer weapons, as well as some concepts and valuable community tools that are more prevalent in Nordic-inspired LARP, which tends to be more freeform and less about fighting and more about feelings. My specific area of interest is very much in games that combine these two. So I've been like a little obsessed with following the progress of Lost Colonies for that reason. And I think that when we settle on the answer to the question, what is American LARP, it's going to be something like this. It's really going to be like, it includes all those things, but like, check this out, it's a blend of all of those best practices, the best of both worlds. And I'm really interested in exploring that. I wrote a piece for LARPing.org recently about Dragon Thrones, another game I worked on, and that game, they wanted to import a lot of safety culture, which I helped them do from the more Nordic-inspired LARPs, but the game by nature, it's Game of Thrones inspired, and it has some mechanics, so it's very competitive. So you have this cooperative roleplay experience and this competition, and there is a need for games that reconcile that, and Lost Colonies LARP is going to be one of those games that satisfies the need for goal-oriented play and being a little bit competitive, but also lets you do that in a safe way. And those safety features and the way that people can speak with each other and play with each other in a safe way and have ways to communicate about safety and consent actually means you can take more risks in roleplay. So I don't live near Lost Colonies LARP, but I will absolutely be down for one of the games, if not the first one. LARP isn't really my thing, but it sounds similar to designing a video game, but in real life. Yes. As a business person, as a professional, I'm trying to think about if and how I should even get into these game design conversations. My background is in publishing, marketing, and editing, and storytelling is really important in all of those things, as well as obviously in LARP. And when I'm asked about how I come up with innovative marketing ideas, the answer is I LARP all the time. I make LARPs, I'm participating in LARPs, I'm talking to people about them, and storytelling is the thread that ties it all together. So I do think on a consultant level, I could probably help with some video game concepts. Especially with the trend that story gaming and story-centric gaming is becoming more popular. I just downloaded an app on my phone recently called Last Scene. It is very much like the video game Her Story. This is called Last Scene Online, and you figure out this story. Let me see if I can show you my phone here. I'm just checking to make sure it goes up, but there's a bit of a delay. You figure out the story based solely, I think I need to move it over, based solely upon these text messages that you're getting. I'm going to hold it in front of my face because my face is on the screen. So you figure out these text messages and you figure out like the mystery. Things like that are the future of gaming when it comes to video gaming and stuff like that. So yeah, like, it does kind of apply to video gaming and tabletop gaming, too. Yep. LARP just happens to be my jam. This is, like, my favorite. I love talking about that stuff. I run something called LARP Chat Live, which you will see again up on here soon. I try to run that pretty regularly, but I had, like, some difficulties with where am I going to live? What kind of job am I going to have? So that got disrupted for a bit, but I have a pretty good setup, so you're going to see some LARP Chat Live from me soon, where we talk about things like that that are specific to LARP but can be applied to other types of games. So those bigger design conversations, really you should be watching that if you're a marketer, a video game designer, a writer. It'll help you think about those other things in a different way. Just like I tell LARPers, if you want to design a game, don't get your head stuck in LARP game design. Go watch a movie. Go find an innovative graphic novel that hasn't hit the mainstream. That's where your head wants to be at. And we still need to do an interview. Yeah, we have to do something for LARP Chat Live. I need to work on it again. I don't know if Adam's still in here. My buddy Adam. He did my overlay before, and now I need a new overlay for Twitch. I'm also waiting on new equipment. I've got all these like business deals pending. I want to get it looking sharp to do LARP Chat Live, But I do feel like with this specific format, we could probably do it. We could probably accomplish it. So, yeah. So we will schedule that soon. Okay. Coastal regions. Okay. And they tend to be the most independent from the empire. Okay. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste this one. I've got a couple changes to make here. There are a couple places where I feel like the language could be more colorful, not like, don't drop F-bombs, right? But like in a, just kind of prettying it up, making it a little more flowery. And so I've tried to find those and add in some suggestions that you're welcome to accept or reject. Okay, so review on. Okay. We talked about the empire thing. And, you know, my first read is primarily for these grammatical things. And these are very subtle changes I'm making. Some of these things aren't even wrong. It's more about the connotation, right? So, for example, I'm offsetting, at least according to the Empire, because I get the tone. I'm picking up what you're throwing down. And I want to make sure that's thrown to the readers too. Are least impacted in the daily lives by imperial rule. Okay. Cool. Yeah, like, yeah. I want to make sure that tone goes through. So I'm not going to make this, like, prettier per se. I'm just kind of making sure that the connotation comes through. So in language, there are two things. There's denotation and connotation. Joe, I'm not trying to, like, language explain to you. This is kind of for everybody else who's watching. And denotation is the, like, by the book meaning, and connotation is what people actually draw from it. It's actually very similar to intent versus impact. And so I want to make sure that your connotation and your denotation are sort of aligned here. And that's why I'm doing some of the more subtle changes. Okay. Cotton and silk, both readily available. Okay. And this is just super micro level grammatical stuff here. Influences to clothing choices though. Okay, good. Yeah. Hey, that's why you know when to go to the right person for the right thing. Oh no, there are no skills listed for Lieber. I'll put a note there for you. Okay. Save. Other regions. Director approval is required to play character from these regions. Okay. One question I have for you, Joe. Approval is being given at this time only to marshals and to players who have played at least 6 events. Couple questions here. Number 1, are people going to see that as gatekeeping? I don't think so, but I just want to throw it out there as people might complain. The whole "at this time" phrase, I know that you do like software related things, and that you're the kind of person who is going to have a rulebook update probably in a year or something like that. Do you want the rulebook to read at this time though, or do you want it to? Because when you make those updates, I don't want you to have to go through a full edit each time. So you might want to say at times, staff only gives approval to marshals and players who have played at least 6 events. Yeah, so I'm going to change it to that, and you'll get why. Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste that one. Because it makes it easier to miss stuff, and you don't want to have to go through and edit each time. Okay, 20 points. And revise. Marshals, and we don't need the 2. Players is captainless. At least we're under 10, so there we go. Cool. Okay. Independent nation, new south from the region. Uniform light gray color. That's really interesting that you're using color to indicate. That's pretty cool. Oops. Okay. Okay. I like the background explanation. Real simple. Real simple. And you don't have to go through each and everything. You don't have to like explain what a farmer is, right? Apprentice smithing 1. Okay. Consider for every mention of skills throughout. I spelled that wrong. Throughout book. So some of your skills have really common sense names, which is good, but you're going to want to visually differentiate them because of that, right? So I'm going to suggest that kind of change. It is helpful that they're capitalized, and that's one reason why I didn't want to make that change. Okay, backgrounds. Consider making backgrounds skill games in table format. cooking. Guilds. Guilds is a broad term that includes civilian guilds. Orders that make up the empires. Okay, sorry I'm getting real quiet. Easy enough to change with my system, awesome. I'm getting real quiet because I'm just like rolling through it like I want to roll here. Okay. Is military a specific thing, or like military orders would be capitalized, but I'm trying to decide upon empire's military apparatus. So unless military is a specific name for a thing, I'm going to lowercase that. Character sheet. Rather. Military orders is a thing, military isn't. Okay, so empire's military apparatus. That's what I want. Got it. So I'm going to leave military order because that's a thing. I'll change the other one. The groups close together into a logical opposition. I saw a pipe upon the chair where my old pipe should be. Well, I called me wife and I said to her, will you kindly tell to me who owns that pipe upon the chair where my old pipe should be? You silly old fool, till you cannot see. That's a lovely whistle that my mother said to me. I'm at the point in the rulebook where I'm comfortable with kind of absorbing more lore as I go. So I'm going to start to advise you put more specific things. You have to head out now. Cool, thank you. Nice. Pine Lord! Joe, cool, thanks. I'll send this to you when it's done, and I'm going to export this to YouTube so you can actually see the whole thing. Pine Lord, it is so great to see you too. I know it's been a while since I've been streaming, but yeah, I am editing a rulebook for a live-action role-playing game. Actually, Joe's game. He just left. That's what I'm working on today. How have you been? How have things been on Twitch? My life got a little crazy there, Pine Lord, so I missed your puns. You will be happy to know. I actually thought of you recently, Pine Lord. The guy that I am dating right now is all about puns. And when I first started seeing him, I was like, yo, he needs to meet Pine Lord. Because I was like, I remembered you always say it's terrific to see you. And like, yeah, I'm okay. I have been like trying to nail down a different job, and my living situation sort of in flux. Really comfy where I am right now, but it's temp. So that's pretty much been consuming my life, and I've been kind of transitioning my freelance work. I'm trying to have a day job during the day just to have a paycheck, and I'm trying to really grow the Larp side of my business at night, because like editing full-time hasn't worked, but I have been getting a lot of jobs like this editing rule books. So I'm like, I think I've carved out a very specific niche for myself, and I also enjoy doing this more than books and stuff. So I have my main author that I still work with and will always work with, but yeah, like that's kind of what I found. And I'm like, whatever with marketing, I'm like flipping a table on it. I'm over it. I don't like the industry. I don't like how it treats people. I don't like the turnover. So I've been through a hell of a journey, right? So I'm trying to just apply that knowledge to this kind of stuff to help people who are running LARPs, which is what this is. Okay. Some of these are formatting things. This is a developmental edit, a sensitivity edit, and a grammar edit. Right now, this is my first read, so I'm mainly looking for grammar. But what I am doing is making some other suggestions as I find them. Okay. And he's going to redo the paragraph things, so I don't have to worry about that. And this is going to be 20 point. Okay. You've been through a hell of a journey? Well, don't stop believing. Pine Lord, I missed you, buddy. That is why I missed you, and that is why I think of you from time to time. Oh, you're great. You're great. Let me know if you have any questions about what I'm doing. You're quite seasoned in the world of writing and editing, so I'm not going to 101 you with stuff. Okay. Military order stays capped. So one thing I will explain to you is in a role-playing game kind of book, there are some things that you would in like a novel maybe not let capitalize, but anytime we're referring to very specific things that you would put on a character sheet, like a background or ancestry or a class, or in this case, military orders, that's a thing, so I'm leaving those capped. But the military in general, I'm not capping. And I had a lot of back and forth questions with Joe on that. That's a super important thing about this. Okay. For each guild, a guildmaster's each guild. And we're doing Oxford comma. Okay, guild was selected. Insert. Unless this is intentionally mysterious. Okay. Looking below then. Okay. This too needs to be. I think I've kind of simplified my layout and my editing and everything like that too. I'm still using the same old computer, man. It's a drag, but that will change eventually. I'm just waiting on this whole job situation to straighten itself out, you know? One of my bad habits is I don't pay much attention to what streamers are doing. That's okay. I love virtual court jesters. Like I said, the guy I'm seeing is a punster, so he is really interested also in things like this that I do. But he'll like make a joke, and I am super serious all the time. So I love when my friends are more like that, as long as they're not jerks, and you're not a jerk, so we're good. But if you do have a question, let me know. Each colonist is selected to join. Where they will then training. Okay. Military orders. Ruling orders and presentations. This is interesting. So Joe, who was just in here, he's a joker and you're so serious. Yeah, just call me Harley. No, Joe, who designed this, is a very technical thinker. So one thing that I tell a lot of people to do normally in rulebooks is, hey, you should totally make this into a chart or something like that. Since he's really technical, he's done that already, and it makes me very happy. I'm just really proofreading it to make sure that he didn't like misspell things. Okay. This all makes sense to me. Okay. Cool chart. Building things and tearing things down. Oops, I don't want to do that. Thought I took off the track changes. Building structures and tearing them down. There's other choice of handing weapon construction and maintenance of the weapons and armor you choose to employ. Serious. Do you want to know how I got these charts? How did you get those charts, Pine Lord? Could be armor training. I feel like I need to change in what's it called? My music. I'm going to change my music here. Alright, we're changing to this. We're going to try a daily mix. Come on, Spotify, keep up with me, bro. I'm running with some old equipment here, so it takes a while. Okay. Alright. Moving on. I'm rolling through this. I'm like almost halfway through. The guard are generally considered. Guard are generally guards. Guards are generally awesome. Members of the Order of Medicus are changing all methods of healing and caring for the fellow soldiers. The colony, okay. Not on the field. This has a couple corrections. Alright, a couple different corrections here. 20. And build the colony. There we go. So I made that update. I'm totally gonna check in on Facebook Messenger. I've got like 8,000 messages. Let me just respond to these. Guess what's about more work doing Larp stuff? Alright, here's this. Email address to this person. Where did it go? Hey, I'm streaming, but you're welcome to come on in.
No, that's all good. I was just gonna let you know we're doing beef stew for dinner.
Okay.
I'm trying to clean up the fridge. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll heat up my Mac.
Where did the store do you need anything?
No, I think I'm good. See you later. I live with awesome nerdy people who like Star Trek. That's all like their stuff in the background. It's pretty cool. Okay. I think I've caught up on everything. Alright. I need to proofread this specific part. Hi again, welcome back. I am proofreading charts. They're pretty cool. Normally I have to tell game designers to make charts because they're people like me who are all like, ooh, whatever. And I'm like, organize this into a chart to make it easier on your players. Let's see. I'm so in love with the fact that this is already in a chart. You've done so well. Okay. Rank 3 Harmony. Okay. Rank 3 Harmony. This is under Order of Medicus. Alignment. Order. Oops. Alignment. Alignment. Okay. I really do like all these charts. They make it easy. Historically, these kinds of rituals. All right. Cannot be. These are just, I'm just really in the weeds with the grammar right now. Real simple stuff. To clean it up. Alright. Check the spacing on here. And the spelling. Wait, image medium. Ranged weapons. There's an alignment issue there. Keep having alignment. Alignment. Spacing issues. Aha! I wasn't the only one. Yeah, I figured, like, if I don't know, then other people are probably gonna have the same question. I think a pronunciation glossary, or like putting the pronunciation um, between or next to the words is gonna help a lot. Forces. Forces is the same problem. Those are just easy formatting issues. I used to work as an academic editor, so I'm like really picky about charts, but we want it to look good. Sketch land stuff. Pistols, though some prefer. So here's an editing thing that happens. For some reason, I feel like that's not how you spell it, but I think it is. I'm just gonna do, yeah, it is, okay. Warston. Like, sometimes something will stick in your head and you'll check it later. Even if it feels like it's a dumb question, I always look up the answer or ask. Pronunciation glossaries would be so nice and often overlooking rule books. I go to another LARP and play a faith-oriented character, and there are 3 different ways the clergy pronounce our god's name. Yeah, I was using the example of New World Magischola and the prison there. Like, their kind of analog for Azkaban is Avernus, and I was like, Avernus, yeah. And my character talked about it a lot, and that's what she said. And then people started saying Avernus and Avernu, and I'm like, what? So glossaries are really, really helpful, especially when you're playing a game and people are coming from different regions. I was using the example Maryland, too, because some people say Maryland, Maryland. I'm from Philadelphia, and I went to school in Westminster, Maryland, and I noticed that my pronunciation was a little different than other people, and I felt weird. I'm like, do I not know how to say the name of the state? The infinitive form of the word to protect in French. Yeah, I assumed that was the root, like protege, like that the word we use in English, but then anytime you mess with a French word, it's like, I feel like that's how someone got Avernu, because they like thought it was French, because some of the lore in Magischola is French, because it's very inclusive of the different cultures that, have lived in North America, the native cultures, the French, the Spanish, the English. So, some of the words are French. My character's in Maison du Bois, so she's, has some spells that are in French. And especially this province, like, the fictional world divides things up into provinces, and the province she lives in also includes Quebec, so there's French-speaking people in this province. And yeah, it's like we have a lot of French words in English and French roots in English, and those are the ones that are the trickiest of, like, how do you pronounce, and that's one of the words. Oh, you're from the Eastern Shore. Very cool. Very cool. I hope to get down your way to Larp and to come to Lost Colonies. Still in Philly, but want to do a little more regional traveling to Larp. Scouts are the best way to travel and avoid dangers. Armed with swords and pistols. Okay, I already got that. I'm checking this chart. This is very similar to what I used to do working for an academic editor, or at an academic publisher as a production editor. Checking the alignment and such. Okay, I think that's the problem. These charts are centered. I don't know, I'm just picky about charts. Civilian, I need to check the spelling. Scout ranged weapons. Okay. Poison, yes. Academic skilled. Okay. It's going to be too small to read even when it's printed out. Okay. It is tiny. There's probably a way for me to, what is it? Increase, I can proofread it. There we go. Sorry, you probably can't see everything on here, on the screen, but I need to increase it temporarily just to proofread this one part. Theology, correct. Alright, that's probably better. The font on the academic skills skill chart might be a bit small. Yeah, I definitely. Some of the charts are these are gonna be a little small. A lot of them are a little small. Okay. Charts are good though. I wish more rulebooks did charts. New world of torque hands. I feel like I need to keep referring to a map as I read. The more I read. Yeah, reformatting. Yeah, and I'm not going to get too specific about it because it's funny because Joe was like the person I would go to if I made this and was like, I don't know how to do this, how format. So I'm just saying, it's too small. Expansion of the colony. Colony is always capitalized in this text. Make a stylistic note. Okay. Go away into to discover what is out there. So Captain Picard, I'm doing this for discovery, okay. Alright. Maps and drive. Resources Guild. Oh, I didn't look at these lists. Whoops. I gotta do that. I'm gonna make this bigger. Languages. Orienteering, system collection, archaeology. Okay. Cartography, history, dowsing, languages, trapping and foraging. Animal handling, explorer. Alright. This all checks out. I can go back down so you can see it now. There we go. Okay, not a normal capitalization change I make, but we want to be consistent since this is a thing. Smithing Guild, tools, we're using the Oxford comma. Okay. We're going to fix this paragraph up a little bit more. Okay. Okay. They're also responsible for running the wagons, buildings, or best weapons and armor are made by the smith, who also understands function. Who understands function as well as the form. So training and the testing of weapons and armor is also encouraged. Okay, just make that a little bit clearer. All right. Just checking these charts. Okay. I think I'm going to, okay, good. I'm almost through these. The charts are a little tedious to edit, but they're very, very important and necessary. Chart title spaces. I'm going to just suggest make a very slight gray background. Where it says herbalist. Okay, just make that easier to read for people. People like me who are like, charts. If needed, but usually operate. If needed, but usually. Self-defense purposes. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna make this bigger again so I can read. Sloan Church. Okay. Yeah, I definitely recommended that all of these charts be a little bigger, if possible. This is really fantastic compared to what most Larps do, though. Okay, build points. Enable people to create their characters. Okay, that's not right. Fix that stuff. Enable people to create their characters. Oh, to create their characters. That's what he means to say. That's what it is. To enable people to create. I love that. Session 0 events may be in person or virtual. Very good use of technology. Character creation online. I like it. It's very, very, very in line with what I do. Very accessible. Cool. So I am at 50%, and I have a message, don't I? Let me tend to that. Sorry, I skipped this message. Well, thank you, Gladiator person, for that insightful message. So I'm going to end the stream for now. I might be back later, but I may not have time to switch back to editing this particular thing today. So thank you to those who joined me, and I am going to upload this eventually so that Lost Colonies Larp can check it out. And again, thanks for joining me. Thanks to those who contributed. I appreciate it. And I will see you later.